Okay, now I see you. Okay, short introduction. Kat Mustatea is a playwright and technologist. She co-curates Edge Cut, a live performance series, is a member of New Inc., an art and tech incubator at the New Museum of Contemporary Art in New York. One of her works, Voidopolis, won the Arts and Letters Unclassifiable Prize for Literature and the Dante Prize for Art. It's a coincidence you are here the same evening as Professor. I know everybody's thinking, there's a theme tonight. And she has been exhibited internationally, including Ars Electronica this year. And I'll let you talk about it. Okay, all yours.
Okay, so I'll try to share my screen. All right. I'm just gonna dive into a very quick intro video because I think it does a good job of just introducing you to the project that I'm going to speak about. The project is Voidopolis, an augmented reality book that is made to disappear. And I do hope that Professor Ascoli sticks around because it is very much about Dante, or partly about Dante. Okay, so it's 3 minutes, super quick. Hopefully the volume is okay. Voidopolis is a digital performance about loss and memory that is currently unfolding on my Instagram feed. The story is a loose retelling of the Inferno by the pre-Renaissance poet Dante, and informed by the grim experience of wandering through New York City during a pandemic. Instead of the celebrated poet Virgil, my guide through this modern hellscape is a sarcastic hobo named Nikita. Voidopolis makes use of what I call synthetic language. I use a GPT-2 text generator that has been modified to only generate words that don't contain the letter E. In English, most past tense verbs end in ed, so this particular constraint means the past in the story warps in peculiar ways, which for me evokes how we all experienced a sense of time without history during the lockdown. The images are created by algorithmically wiping humans from stock photography. As the project has progressed, I've started to only partially wipe some figures, leaving faces without eyes and hands disconnected from bodies. I started posting in July 2020 after deleting 7 years worth of posts from my Instagram. I turned my feed into a stage of sorts for this narrative, and I think of the way people interact with the posts by liking or commenting on them as a form of applause. This is a story meant to be ephemeral and to eventually disappear, just like any theatrical performance would. So I'll be deleting it all from my feed once it's complete. By disappearing, the project makes a case for the collective amnesia that necessarily follows great cataclysm. I'll be writing 2 more parts of the narrative soon, which correspond roughly to Dante's Purgatory and Paradise, and each of these sections will have a distinct language constraint and visual style, and establish each its own mood of increasing hope as we emerge from pandemic. I'm also working on adapting Voidopolis into a limited edition augmented reality book that animates the text and imagery when viewed through a special app. But in this case, the text and imagery is designed to decay a little after each reading. So if you read through the story enough times, the images and text will decay completely. And the printed book will become a leftover artifact with garbled pages and kind of like an empty stage. In keeping with the ephemeral nature of the original project, this documentation of Voidopolis in book form is meant to ultimately also disappear. Okay, so The video you just heard is actually a little bit outdated because it was made at the beginning of this year when I hadn't yet made the book. But I'll explain a little bit about the steps that got me to this book in the first place. The project, as it was described in the video, which I started last year, it won this unclassifiable prize for literature, which seemed a very aptly named prize for this particular project, because it seems like everywhere I've presented it, it has kind of like fit into various categories. So for the literary prize, it was printed, it was partially printed in a literary magazine. So obviously the focus was on the literary quality of the text. It had also pretty early on gotten a lot of attention for the fact that I'm using a GPT-2 text generator, which, and if you know of the literary group, the Oulipo movement from the 1960s or so, you might recognize that missing the letter E is a kind of homage to Georges Perec's novel, also named Avoid in English, which was translated into English also without the letter E. And the title in English is Avoid. So, and then I have also shown this work in galleries as a visual work, and in that case, then people tend to look much more at the images rather than the text, or rather than the fact that it was on Instagram. But in any case, as this was developing back in January, there were. It was still on my Instagram feed at the time. There was still sort of episodes being posted every few days, and I would get a lot. I told everyone, this is going to be on my Instagram feed for a time. You can read it for a time, and when I'm done, it'll be gone. And I got a lot of questions about, like, wait, but is it really gone? Like forever? Like forever? So, but can you bring it back, or can you read it later somehow? And at the time, in January, I got a publication grant to do the project. And I started to think about, like, what might a publication version of this very ephemeral project about loss be like? And I thought, well, at minimum, it might have the quality of a kind of a catalog, if the exhibit here is really the Instagram posts, if that's the gallery, so to speak, then perhaps there might be a physical book that is a kind of catalog companion to this exhibit. And I like the idea of potentially using augmented reality in some form to go along with this book, because it would then kind of gesture toward the digital origins of a project like this. But I had a kind of conceptual difficulty with the idea that everything about this project is about loss. So there's loss in the very text itself. There's loss in the images and the way that they're created. There's loss in the fact that it will be wiped away. But augmented reality is it's a medium that is really about adding a layer to what is reality. So it's an additive process, and I think the big question was, how might I reconcile this text, this book, and this format, the virtual reality format, with the idea of making this whole piece being about loss. And so the book that I eventually came to is meant to disappear. And so I will explain how that works. So let's see. The idea is, sorry, I have got my notes here. I partnered with a design firm called Process Studio. Here we are at Ars Electronica, looking a little bit like an indie rock band. They specialize in designing algorithms, and they also had a very good sort of portfolio of print publications. So they seem like the right kinds of collaborators who might help me figure out how to take both the images and the texts and decay them or algorithmically in a way that so that, okay, I feel like I'm missing a step here because I have my slides in the wrong order, but I will. So here's the slide. Sorry. So the concept for this book is that what you see printed as a physical book, here it is, here's the book printed, is the end stage of a decay process of both these images and the text. And here they are. There's the text, there's the image. Sorry, the filter on Zoom doesn't let me show it very well. So what you are printing in the book is the end stage of a decay process. And the only way to access the real contents of the book is to use an augmented reality app. So you are reading the book through an app. But this app decays both the images and the texts, so that after a certain time or gradually over time, as you read this book, the images and texts both start to disappear. And eventually the app doesn't work anymore, or doesn't, doesn't let you access the imagery anymore. And you're left just with the artifact. And the idea for this is that your book, your very personal book, would decay at the rate that you are reading the book, but perhaps someone else who has a different copy of the book, who hasn't read it as much, their book might still sort of be alive or continue to be alive until they read it, so that everybody's book decays at a different rate. So, and I'll just go through a little bit of how we envision this process, the decay process. So here's to the left is the image that I would say the original image, but it's not really the original image. This is already the image that through the on the Insta. This is an image I posted on Instagram. So it's an image of children crossing the street, but I of course wiped away the children and left only the shadows. But then the Process Studio, working together, we created this algorithm, or we found this way of decaying the images even further. So the image on the right is the end stage of that decay process, which is algorithmic, and it's applied to each image. Here's another example. So as I described in the video, I was sort of wiping away body parts of people, and the image on the left is mine. And then here's that same decay process, this algorithmic kind of decay that we applied to these images, and on the right is the end stage of that. So on the right is the image that appears in the print version of the book. And what's really lovely about this process that we came to together was that we really searched for some mode of decay that felt organic. A lot of digital processes applied to imagery tend to look in a certain way. They tend to look very sort of computational. They have a certain aesthetic. And what I love about the process we eventually came to was that it has this like very soft and milky quality to it, which isn't what you would associate with an image that has been sort of like computationally altered. Here's another one, same thing, just this milkiness that seemed very special and unlike any other kind of decay process that I've seen for images. And then we try to do something similar to the text as well. And oh, actually, here's the lead image and its milky quality. Sorry, this is the book at Ars Electronica. So you see that there's the installation, there's the book, there's someone reading the image through the app. Well, there's me reading the image through the app. I feel like I'm missing oh, here we go. I don't know why it skips over things. Here's an example of how we decided to treat the text, and there's a similar kind of quality of decay here. Some words gradually sort of disappear, and then other words kind of get this like strange gunky quality to them. But we also decided before applying these algorithmic decay processes that we developed for the text, that we would I would go through the text and pick out some of the phrasings that I wanted to remain and sort of mark those off so that they would not decay. So there's a bit of a quality here of erasure poetry in that, you know, certain phrases were picked to remain and everything else was allowed to decay, and some things would then decay and some not. And then I'll just show you a little bit of how the manuscript looks. So this is a page out of the manuscript. There's this would be the, you know, the left-hand page, and here's the corresponding right-hand page. Each of the entries were kind of in a, instead of numbering the episodes as they did on Instagram, for the book, we created we just went by the date, so that it has this quality of being a diary, or has this diaristic quality or episodic quality to it. And then we also did something to kind of gesture to the idea of its origins on Instagram, which was that, I don't know if you can see, but in the lower right, we geotagged each page to the location where this image would have, or this part of the text would have been. But there's again this quality even to the geotags that sometimes a certain episode was very recognizably in a very particular place in New York City. Like, you know, here we have a specific beach in Montauk, New York, and I named that beach. But then others of the episodes were the narrator himself or herself doesn't know where they are, and wouldn't have been able then to kind of decide where this episode should be geolocated. And so then the tags are sometimes the geotags are sometimes very specific and sometimes very murky and general. And so even in that detail, we went for sometimes giving very detailed information and sometimes kind of letting the information kind of deteriorate in a certain way. Okay, let's see. So I think that's all I feel like I know this project very well in a sense because I've lived with it for the past year, but I also, so I think maybe, you know, I would benefit from hearing impressions or questions or answering questions if I haven't explained something clearly. So maybe I'll just open it up for questions then.
I know Albert has some comments. First, I want to ask you, when I initially saw the description of the installation, the connection with Dantes Inferno was more or less, I mean, nothing is obvious when it comes to the visual arts, especially modern ones, but more or less. But I miss how that fits with the idea of loss. Can you explain how you put the two together?
Why Dante and
why Dantes Inferno and the concept of loss and the process of disappearing?
I could go into that further. So the original kind of impulse for writing this was, you know, during the pandemic, and it's just it came from this sense. I felt that the rituals of daily life, like things like posting on Instagram, what I ate today, had sort of been suspended in lockdown. Like normal life just sort of came to a standstill, and it seemed not right to use Instagram in the same way that we had before. It seemed like nothing was the same as it was before. And so trying to write this story was, or trying to use Instagram in this narrative way was a way of trying to like talk about what was happening. And it seemed like Dante was the natural poet to show you, or to show me how to create a kind of a guidebook for how to navigate a truly hellish experience, and how to narrate a truly hellish experience, you know. So, you know, I think that was the impulse for why Dante, like, why am I following in his footsteps in this way of narrating? There's a kind of episodic quality to his journey, and there was an episodic quality to just Instagram post after Instagram post. But for me, what I understood, so I know that Dante maybe didn't necessarily take on the idea of loss in the same way that I did in this project, but for me, this was very much narrating about loss. It was in New York City in particular. It was very dark at the time. I mean, people were going into hospitals and not coming out. So there was a sense of like the disappearance of humans. There was the disappearance of daily life. There was the disappearance of any sort of normalcy. And so, you know, how do you talk about loss? You just, you have a shadow left of where you think the person was. And that was, I think that part is my narrative, right?
Albert.
Oh, well, I love the presentation. I love your project. My first question is, I have several comments, and Piero, you can just stop me when I have been going on too long. My first question is, what's the name of your Instagram account? Is it Voidopolis, or is it your name?
It's my name, so it's
Okay.
Mustatea. Oh, I don't remember if I mentioned, but in fact, the Voidopolis piece of this is now gone. So you can go there. So I used my feed as a stage, and just like a stage, you know, you put the show and then you take the show away and the show's gone. But I have started the second, so the purgatory part of this, which has the title Ambivalent.
Okay.
So you can.
So okay, so it's not all Voidopolis. Voidopolis was Inferno. Ambivalent is okay. I like that. I like that. There are some, you know, there are some Dantisti reasons that I can give you for why void is particularly appropriate in Inferno, even though it's actually the most physical experience that Dante has. After that, the souls that he meets are clearly souls, and he's a body, but they're not.
Yes.
But Inferno itself is actually a void. It's a conical, empty space around which he rotates as he travels. And then there, at the end of Canto 10 of Inferno, it's explained to him that the souls, these damned souls, can see things happening on Earth. They can't see the things they want to see, but as the closer they get to the last judgment, they will see less and less and less until finally it's a complete emptiness, a complete. So in some ways it fits very well with Dante. And so yes. The other thing I wanted to know is if you are familiar with a website called Dante Today.
Yes, they are big
I'm
fans.
sure they're all over what you're doing.
Yes, I was very excited when they got wind of the project, and were so excited by it, because as I said, this project initially got attention as an art project and as a sort of technology infused project, but I was very excited that like there would be some people reading along who like got my Dante jokes. That seemed very important to me.
Well, hopefully more people will go after they see it or read it, as long as it's still there. We'll go and read some Dante. A couple of last comments. One is that, of course, in a certain sense, you're at the antipodes from Dante, as it were, in the sense that his, as I just was talking about, his work and his books have gone on being reproduced for over 700 years now, actually more than 700, since others were circulating before he died. And that sort of leads to a question more about the principle of the disappearing book than about Dante, which is there a kind of comment on, A, the historical disappearance of the book, B, the ephemerality of modern culture, all that kind of thing that people in my position tend to lament. I mean, I kind of think it's, if you'll pardon the expression, shit happens. And this may be pretty deep, but it's happening. So anyway, sorry, let you answer my question.
Well, I have to say that the responses that I've gotten to the project have just been, in book culture, the idea that like your book just dies, that like something about it sort of disappears, seems super shocking. So that's why I think, in a kind of book culture, this is a crazy shocking thing to do. But I come from theater, so the idea that something is there and then it's not anymore, and that you've only experienced it for a while, and then afterwards you're really just carrying around a picture or a phrase from this whole thing that you've experienced, that is, I'm very used to that concept. So where I come from, it's not shocking at all.
No, and I doubt that most of the reactions you're getting from book lovers, bibliophiles, are really because they're shocked. It seems like it's more because they're recognizing something that they can't stop, that you've turned it into a form of art, but in a different way. It's just happening all the time around us as we move from, I read books now on my app, on my Apple, on my iPhone, not in book form. I'm tired of filling my house full of books. And I'm sure my heirs are not going to want to get all of those books. But there's a lot more to that than I, I think that you're presenting us with a very difficult reality, and that a reality though that can be beautiful. Anyway,
I have a question. What do you see any connection between your disappearing book and Bansky's shredded painting, which, by the way, is, I believe, is on sale again for much more and not many $1 million.
I really appreciate the comparison. I find it like a fabulous comparison, because I do think that there's something about like I do feel like there's a graffiti quality to what I'm doing, and a sort of irreverence. You know, I'm just going to make great literature, but it's going to be on, you know, on Instagram, you know, in this like sort of vernacular, really. It's the vernacular of today, right? So I love the Banksy comparison. And you know, if you do read the story, if you do purchase the book, well, they're not for sale yet, but if you end up with a book and you really read through the story, you know, there's a bit of an irreverence even in how I, you know, take this kind of sarcastic hobo named Nikita as my Virgil. So yeah, thank you for that. I'm glad you picked up on it.
Okay, Albert, any more remarks?
No, just I will be a follower of yours as soon as I get off. And I'd love to talk to you more about Dante as you move through the other canticles. So I'm easy enough to find.
And of course, I'm looking forward to the Paradiso.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I just at this point I'm like, is the Paradiso ever going to come? Because it's hard to picture what it will be. I mean, I'll figure it out along the way, but
you should look at Sandro Botticelli's illustrations of the Paradiso in particular, because they're very ephemeral. In fact, they seem to have been just kind of sketches for something that he might have done later on, but they give a real idea of a sort of half there, half not Paradiso. And certainly the Paradiso is the canto which is the most elusive, and where it's most obviously that this whole thing has just been put up there so Dante can see it. It doesn't actually describe even the reality of the souls after the saved souls. They're all off in the heaven of heavens. They're not where Dante finds them, as it turns out. Anyway, so there's much to be done with Paradiso. I actually think that Purgatorio is going to be tougher, but Ambuland works pretty well. Anyway,
Great.
thank you so much.
thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.